Hello everyone, I'm Yazeed, and I'm going to be doing a new piece of content for Homegames. Just I didn't really come up with a name for it, so I'm just going to make something up. Um, we're going to make a game together. So we're going to call this Let's Make a Game Together using Homegames, which hopefully Joseph will workshop. For the time being, like I said, I'm Yazeed, and we're going to make a game together. So, start off with, let me just kind of walk everyone through my idea for a game. If you've ever played like Halo multiplayer before, you probably know the game mode Infection. This is going to be kind of based on that, where there's one person who's it, and they tag other players, and slowly, you like as each player becomes tagged, they switch teams from like the runners, people are running away, to the taggers team, if that makes sense. So this is going to be use some of the stuff that Joseph has just added in, and some stuff that has been in there previously. And so yeah, we're probably going to call it color tag for two reasons. One, I mean, with everything going on in the world, I probably don't want to call a game Infection. I feel a little bit weird about that, so we're going to call it color tag. And the other reason is Infection might actually be copyrighted. I'm not sure. But anyway, all that aside, let's make a new game together. So we're going to actually use the base from Square. So I kind of wrote down some like really high level steps that we're going to follow. So step one is we're going to copy over Square and make some modifications to it so it's its own game. The second thing we're going to do is actually like modify the code and change some stuff. And the third step is going to be some refactoring that we need to do. One part of that is I'm sure there's just some modernization stuff that we need to do. I do know for sure I have like some idea of some stuff we need to do. Another part is I imagine there's probably going to be some just dead code after we're done with this that was in Square that won't be in color tag. Yeah. So anyway, let's get into it. So like I said, we're going to just start with a new game. Bloop, bloop, bloop. I'm going to call it colortag.js. And if everything goes well, you won't be able to hear that I'm listening to music right now, because I tend to listen to music while I write code. So right now we're just going to leave everything more or less the same, and we're just going to call this color tag. I'm going to jump down to the bottom and color tag. Yeah. So for people who can't tell, I guess, I use Windows. So yeah, it's like everything in here is Windows based. And then I have two command terminal windows open. One runs the web Homegames web with the app server, and the other one runs the game server from just the Homegames. And that was based on master. So this is just a fresh check out of master as of 4:37 p.m. on 9/19. So yeah. So if we go back to here, make this bigger, we can see that there's a new game called Color Tag. So if we take a look at what Color Tag looks like right now, this is actually just Square exactly. So we can see that there are for a second I was like, why is my square the same color as those gold 8 NPC squares? But anyway, so as you can see, there's a couple of things going on. So I have a square that can move, which we want to keep. We have some squares at the top, which you can enter right now, but after a certain level, you can no longer enter. And I kind of like the idea of having some terrain that is impenetrable, or like you can't move on top of it, basically. And then the last thing is we have this goal position right here. And I don't think we actually need the goal position. So we might move that into like the upper right hand corner and have that be the marker for who's it. Although I haven't decided yet if I want people to know who is it or not. I think it might be interesting to add like a little bit of deception to it. Since everyone moves at the same speed, I imagine it'd be quite difficult for the taggers to tag if they don't have some advantage, at least in the beginning. So, so this is kind of like where we're at right now. And we're going to pause the game server Oops, we're gonna pause the game server. There we go. Just, I tend not to just leave it running while I'm writing code. Movement and stuff distracts me. So let's get in on this, yeah? So we can see in here, this is the metadata. I will eventually change this thumbnail, but I'm gonna leave the metadata alone for right now. Doesn't really make that much of a difference to me. This constructor. So as you can see here, we set a default size, which is actually pretty important to the game. This is the default size for all of the squares. It's like player squares and the NPC squares, which will become the like you can't move on them squares. They're not. We'll call them the disallowed squares for right now. We're gonna keep that then. The base right now is just a rectangle with a black background. I think that's fine. If we want to change colors or allow a player to be take the black color as their option, we might switch this to maybe like a different color background. I would stay away from white just because that's very bright. In here now, we said there's a start line, and we don't actually need the start line anymore. So we're gonna just get rid of it because we don't really care. And we can get rid of it here. And as you can see, there's no more start line. The finish line, this one's interesting because we do want some parts of this code, right? We want to see the parts of this code that disallows a player from entering this after a certain point. So, but as you can see, like I don't actually use the coordinates. And this is what I was trying to say earlier about like the refactoring. There's stuff like this that is not great from like a coding perspective, like a code clarity perspective. But for the time being, we can actually just drop that as well. The destination color here, we disallowed black, gray, gold, and green. We don't actually need those anymore. We can just disallow black and gray now. So our destination color will be, we will call it tagger color instead. So we'll look for this and we'll rename this tagger color. And the reason I'm starting with square instead of just like just starting from scratch again is Square does have some useful utilities in there that aren't a part of Homegames and may not be. Mainly the queue. So Square runs on a like queue of operations, which basically means like if player A moves and player B moves, they don't happen instantly. What happens is players A's movement gets placed into a queue, and then player B's movement request also gets placed into the queue. And the queue gets consumed in order, so player A's movement would occur first, then player B's movement. And that really prevented asynchronous actions, since without that queue, Homegames will just run and calculate as each player attempts to move and NPCs attempt to move. And that does create some problems with calculating for collision. So, excuse me. So yeah, so this will just become the tagger, but I actually really like the idea of people not knowing who the tagger color is. So we're gonna get rid of the destination in this case, right? So we don't need this if statement anymore. That was a part of, I'm sorry. So this kind of completes, this portion basically completes the parts from the constructor that we do definitely need to keep. This .player array, Homegames itself has a player array of like an array of like all the players in the game. So we'll probably switch to that, but for right now I'm gonna leave it in. This is that movement queue that I was talking about, where it's the queue of all the movements to occur. This .npcs, we'll just change this actually to this .terrain. We may add like moving terrain later, but for right now, I don't really see a reason to call it NPCs since they're not controlled right now. So we're gonna just go ahead and kind of rename this everywhere, just this piece. Doot. Interesting. Oops. Oh man. Jeez. And this was that. Just a couple more entries in here. If it's terrain. I missed the T, that's why. Okay. Boop. Boop. 9 more. Take care of this guy if it's an NPC, if it's terrain. This dot terrain. And boop. 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 Okay, cool. So that's all of the NPC stuff taken care of now. So if we go back up to our top here, our constructor more or less is completed. So as you can see here, basically what this is doing is it's calling the super, which is like Homegames constructor information. This is setting our default. This sets up our base. This sets up our tagger color so that we actually know who the tagger is. And we're going to actually change the logic on that. Since each round we want to calculate a different tagger. This .keydowns, what this is used for is tracking whether a player has let up on their key or not. So the idea is on a keyboard and mouse, or really I guess just the keyboard part of it. What I want to track is them hitting like W, then lifting their finger off W, then hitting W, then lifting their finger off W over and over again, as opposed to just holding down W. So that's what the key down is for, where it gives us a little timeout for it. And we'll see that a little bit later, if I'm not mistaken. This dot level, I don't think this is really important, so we're gonna get rid of it. Used colors, we just need this. And like I said, we're actually gonna get rid of the tagger color right now, because now that I'm thinking about it, we're not actually gonna use it. So the reason I'm holding on to black, because that's the background color here. I don't want a player to get the same color as the background color. And gray, because I'm going to use that for the terrain. So I don't really want a player to be mistaken for terrain or be able to pretend to be terrain to win. This dot player array we'll get rid of during a refactor. This dot movement queue, we're going to keep this, pretty important. This dot terrain, this is just a list of all of the terrain that we're going to generate for right now. And this dot create terrain. So terrain is going to function differently than sorry, I'm realizing now I should get rid of the level stuff. Terrain's going to function differently than the NPCs do in Square. The reason for that is with the NPCs in Square, it was pretty clear where I was going to place them. They're placed in a group of 5 and then a empty slot in another group of 5. So it was pretty easy to say like, oh, where we're going to place them. With this instance, because I want to randomly place terrain, but not in a way that blocks off whole portions of the map or makes part of the map inaccessible. We are going to like write some logic maybe later for how to generate that terrain. But in the meantime, because I got rid of the level stuff, which Square needed and we don't, I'm just going to go ahead and just get rid of this information where this was generated. Actually, I want to keep this piece. Yeah. Okay, so what I don't want is this anymore. I want this piece here. Really, I just want to hold on to this piece for later. This terrain becomes an empty array. Boom. Okay. And again, this here is kind of frustrating for me because we don't need it in 2 spots. So I'm going to get rid of those there. So this instantiates our movement queue. this instantiates our terrain, and we're only going to call create terrain one time moving forward. So if it was called later, we don't need to do it anymore. Cool. And like I said, I don't need to do this either. Const temp. This is right now push temp. This base add child temp. Okay, cool. So for right now, we're going to actually comment this out because I'm not really sure yet what I want to do for the generation of the terrain. So boop. Get root. This function just returns your base, and it's pretty important to how Homegames works on the back end. So you don't usually ever need to make changes to it. In this case, I don't need to. So create the terrain, blah, blah, blah. We'll comment this out. We're going to come back to it. So we're going to actually just add a to-do for right now. Come back and build logic for adding terrain. Because that's kind of what I want to do. Handle new player. So this function right here is something that Homegames Squish calls, or Homegames, the game itself from Squish calls. And really what this does is it instantiates everything that a new player is going to need. So in this case, we create an entry for them under the key cooldown. We give them a color, which is important. And we add them to the used colors. So if you look back in the constructor, we create this used colors array. And this is just so we don't get duplicate colors, just so we avoid confusion. This default X was where they were going to spawn. We're going to hold on to that for right now because as you can see, we were always spawning them at 95 for the Y. This is X, Y, then their size, X, Y. So we don't actually need to always spawn them at the bottom row anymore. But we're going to hold on to this for right now. And our default X, we're going to hold on to as well. We're going to make a more complicated kind of function to give us what this information is. So we're going to hold on to that piece for right now. Here we can see that we added the controller ID, which is the player's ID, their default X, their score, which we don't need anymore. This dot player array dot push. Okay, so we push this into the player array and then we add it to the base. Okay, so that's all fine and dandy. Handle player key, let's go down to this function first, the handle player disconnect. So we're gonna move this up just so we can handle all this. This is what happens when a player disconnects. What we do is we loop through all of the players in here and we just remove their child from the base and then we remove them from the player array. So that's what this does. This is pretty standard, I feel like. And when we switch to using Homegames player array, we won't actually need to handle that anymore. But for right now, we'll hold on to it. Handle key down. So this is what happens when a player presses a key down. So here, for example, we take a look to find who their player ID is by comparing the controller ID that we added in the handle new player to the player ID coming in from here. We find their square after that. And if this dot key downs, blah, blah, blah. If it's an up arrow or W, we add to the movement queue the square that we're working with and push up. If it's down, we go down. If we go left, right. This could actually become an enum, and that would probably be nicer, but I just haven't done that yet. Or consts instead of constructing a string each time. But anyway, this dot key cooldowns. Right, so this adds a timer on there. So right now, every 0.25 seconds or every 250 milliseconds, the cooldown gets cleared. So if somebody was holding down their key, for example, the W key, every 250 seconds, we would read it in as a new key press. And that just prevents input spamming, basically. So yeah, so there's this. Like I said, for the most part, this logic will stay here, but be a little bit different once we switch to player array. So we'll hold on to this now. Handle key up. This function is what happens when a player releases their key. When we catch that their key was released, if they had a key cooldown, we'd release it and then we delete it. So this just means that if you were spamming like the up arrow, for example, it would catch it pretty regularly. I just doubt that you'd be able to remove your finger and then press your finger back down again, and have that sent over the wire both times in less than 250 milliseconds. So, yeah, 250 milliseconds is probably like a minimum that most people won't reach. So tick, we're gonna look at tick in a second. I just want to see if there's anything else in here that's kind of straightforward. Okay, so tick handles the movement queue. Basically, tick is a function that Homegames calls on the tick interval, which I don't remember the default off the top of my head, but there is like a default timer for ticks being called. And this function is called once per time in that interval. So in here, what we did was we looped over the movement queue, which we placed into using like the handle key down event. So here we pull apart the movement. We pull off the first element of the movement queue. So basically, like shift in JavaScript pushes the front element off the array and returns that element. And then we destructure that object here into whether or not it's terrain, if it's then which node we're talking about, and the direction it's traveling in. And interestingly, I don't think we actually need to know if it's terrain or not, because there is no there is no way for we're not going to allow moving terrain for right now. So we can get rid of that. If we look at handle key down, we don't actually include it here. So perfect. In here, let node position X, we grab the position for the node. We see if we grab their size. And we set our new X and new Y. If it's terrain, which we know it won't be the case, we can just drop this off and remove this else statement. Oops, one too many lines there. Push this to the left one. So if the direction is up, we take 5 off the new the node Y position, and we set the new Y position to be 0. So basically, if you're trying to go below 0, you just get placed into 0. Otherwise, we just move you to -5 from your current position. Kind of same for down, right? If you're trying to go too far to the right, you're kind of stuck there. Actually. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, basically we put you at the minimum if you're trying to go down below. We put you below your current spot by 5. And just because of the way square was written, I used 5 as my indicator. So, or not indicator, but like my default number is 5 basically. So, because it divides into 100 really nicely. So, that's where that 5 comes from. And may actually be nice to get like a static const for that. Yeah, that would be a better idea. But we'll address that later. Left is fine. Right is fine. Here we go. Here's our construction of the new guy. Or not the new guy. This is our construction of the rectangle, or the movement of the rectangle. The node. So check collisions. If this dot check collisions and this dot terrain. We don't have this dot terrain anymore. Oh no, we do have this dot terrain, sorry. If there's a collision, then we bounce you back. We may need to add a to-do here. Handle colliding with other players, the tagger, and terrain. So that's going to have to be added kind of in here. Else if, check for collisions. If we hit the destination, then we did all this stuff. Well, we don't have a destination anymore, so oops, don't need this. Okay. So that I think handles our tick stuff for right now. Check for collisions. A lot of this logic we can actually offload onto Homegames, and we probably will. That'll be like one of the first refactor parts that we do, because I don't want to maintain two versions of checking for collisions. Bounce all players back. Is this function used anymore? It is not. This was used in Square to just bounce all the players back to their starting positions after a round is finished, which we obviously don't need anymore. Closed. So the close function is doing Homegames calls when the game itself is being closed out. And the stop player array for each player, the stop base, remove child, blah, blah, blah. Clear interval. There actually isn't going to be an interval anymore on the terrain, so we don't need this piece. And this terrain is reset. And can add players is something else that Homegames was calls. It allows a person who's making a game allow them to specify the max number of players. So in this case, if somebody tried to add a 9th player, they would be told that they aren't actually allowed to add that player anymore. Otherwise they can. But because we won't have static starting positions, we don't actually need this function anymore. So that's all good now. Check for collisions, tick. Okay. So let's save this real quick and just see if this runs. So good first sign. So we have our color tag, open that up, new session. Can't read properly, length of undefined on line 111 of color tag. We're actually going to switch that up then. That's just really unfortunate on my part. It seems like we actually call the tick function at the very start of the game, which is fine. It's just that's what's causing that error. So if we try again. And right now I don't actually have, I think currently it's a PR from Joseph. I like that color. To add the bezel and stuff, so I don't have that right now, so that's kind of why it looks like this. So as you can see, like, we can click and move as much as we'd like, which is good. So that's a good first sign. If I add another player, maybe using Firefox, I don't actually use Firefox very often, so join the session. So with a little green person, as you can see, like as we move here on the Firefox side, we move here and we move here. So right now I can run into a player and just cover them basically. So whichever player was rendered second is currently covering the lower seeded player, like the oldest player. The older player who joined the player who joined the game previously is covered by the player who most recently joined the game. I don't know if what I said makes sense. As part of how Homegames renders controls the Z index. we don't really want players to be able to like cross over each other. So really, like, part of the main part of this is we're gonna have to figure out how the check collisions works and use it. And then the other thing we're gonna need to do is start to actually figure out who we collided with. So if we collided with a player who's just a player, we're good. Neither one of us, we're not allowed to like overlap. If you collided with terrain, you're not allowed to overlap. If you collided with a person who is a tagger, you now become the tagged. You now become a tagger as well. And now that I'm actually thinking about it, how are the taggers gonna be able to figure out who they are? Huh. That's a really good question. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but for right now, at least we know that is going to be a problem. Okay, so game's paused again, and let's go back into here. So I know that we actually do use the check collisions in, I believe, the move test game. So if I actually restart this real quick, because we want to see how these collisions work. Move test, create new session. So as you can see, interesting. So I don't think, okay, so right now it's just preventing you from colliding. Okay. Okay, so you're not allowed to collide using that, so that's fine. Okay, so that's kind of how I want our players to interact anyway. So let's just figure out how this is working. So in here, he calls this piece from common util. Oh, actually, this is a requirement that we don't need anymore. We're gonna go see what that is, but for the time being, let's see how it's used. Const would be collisions. Check this dot base. Then the node, which is the new x and new y. I think 10 by 7. I don't know what 17 is. Oh, their y size. And we return. Okay, so then we pass in a function. That's what this kind of denotes, if you weren't aware. So I'm not really going over much of like the JavaScript syntax, but if anyone has any questions on that, you could always post them in the comments and we would address them. Okay, so return node.nodeID. That's not if the node.nodeID does not equal the base node ID and the node.nodeID doesn't equal player.node.nodeID. What's player? Player seems to be who is doing the moving. Okay, so this is just saying if it didn't run into if it's not just the base that it's running into and it's not just the player that it's colliding with. I guess technically a player collides with itself? That seems weird. Players collide with themselves? Question mark? We'll investigate. wrong thing. Here we go. And it seems we pass in a new node, a new node that's just the coordinates, which makes sense. Okay, so let's take a look at what this function does. So, I mean, in VS Code, which is the editor I'm using, you can just slap F12 and it'll take you where you want to go, just in case anyone needed to know. So we have a root, a node, and a filter function, which is possible. That's what this seems to be. Okay. So, collision helper now. Let's see what that's defined. Okay, so that takes a node to check, a filter, and a collisions array. So const vertices, node check, to node. Let's just use the word hack here. If not, why would vertices have? I see. Okay, sorry. I was reading this to try to figure out what's going on, and I actually think I see something that would... Okay. Let collisions equal an empty array. I want to make this change real quick because I actually think it's better to do it this way. Here, and then we say collisions is equal to collisions dot concat the results from this guy, and you no longer need to pass that in. And then I just want to check something. JavaScript. So the kind of merges two or more arrays, but does not change the existing arrays, but instead returns a new array. And push I'm trying to figure out which is more efficient. So with this one would be constructing a bunch of small arrays, then sticking them all together and garbage collecting them. And in this way, we only have one array that's always fully in memory. Oh, wow, Joseph's method is more efficient. I'm not surprised by that. It's just it is kind of counterintuitive to how I normally think of a recursive function. This is more of a for people who remember, like, know functional coding, this is more like a reducer than like a map or something. Or it reduces to an array and a, right? It reduces this and the filter function down into the accumulator. Okay, I think I understand how this works. And I also think that we can use it very much out of the box, probably. So if we come back to here and we take a look for our to-dos, right? So I know we have one in here for building the logic for the terrain, which we'll come back to, and the other one for this, right? Handling these collisions. So his function returns whether or not the element will collide once it's, completed. We'll do this for right now. If not, right in here, if the collision, oh, I see, this returns a length. If not, oops. If there is no length to the collision, move freely. Else if, else. We need to figure out what type of collision we ran into, right? We need to know what kind of node we ran into. And for that, we kind of need to know what this is. Returning out. So currently, I think our filter is fine, right? If we would run into if we're gonna run into the, we don't care if we run into the base or the player node, which makes sense. So that's cool. Here's our this.base.node.node ID. Would collide. Roger. Okay, so yeah, so let's see what is happening here. If we take a look at how this function works in Square. Okay, so we just changed the components. Okay, so npm start, refresh. Let's try a color tagger again. So players not defined on line 150. That's we're going to remove that check. So the reason for that is the function that Joseph was calling this in the move test had access to which player was calling it, whereas Tick I don't want Tick to know that information, and Tick shouldn't know that information. So as you can see here, if I move, here we go. Interesting information. Hopefully you all can read this. internal game node, ID of 3. We have our color, handle click, border, fill, text, inserts, player IDs. The ID, the controller ID. Right on. Okay, so basically to give you an idea of where I'm at right now, I need to figure out how to do a condition similar to this one where we don't want to pull back the player ID itself. We don't want the player's node to say that it's colliding with itself. That one, I have to ask Joseph about that on the podcast on Sunday. And also I'm just kind of confused by how we could prevent that. Node to check. We do pass the information for the node to check. And we call it node here. Okay, so what we can do inside of here is add the controller ID, which will be, we have node, okay, we're getting there. So for right now, oh boy, where is it? Where do we place it? Not play disconnect, sorry. Node.node.coordinates, and this would be node.controller ID, which would be node.controller. Fudge. Right? So this seems way, hold on, I think I have a better way of doing this. And what we're going to do is we're actually just going to spread node. So we get all the properties of node in here, and then we're going to just change the coordinates. That's not going to work. I don't know if that's easier to read or harder to read. But anyway, so what we're doing here is we're adding the controller ID to here so that we can say Oh, I don't actually need to do that. This is what I want. Yeah, there we go. And that is a long function, but I think it's fine. So basically what we're checking now is if the node.node.controller ID doesn't equal node.controller ID, which we would know as we're iterating through here, like the way scoping works. So, okay, so there we go. Hot reload would be nice, I feel like. Oh boy. What happened? Huh. That's the game server. Refresh here. Make a new session. So I have my little boy now. Do. I guess we are going to need this. Oops. So does the node.controller ID not equal node.controller ID? I see the problem. This needs to be renamed to incoming node. Oops. So if the incoming node does not match the base, and the incoming node's controller ID doesn't match. Okay. There we go. That should fix it. Yeah, there we go. Okay. And now if we open up a Firefox window, something broke. Okay. Well, I think this has been like an hour. So I'm going to call it for right now. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so um, I did some digging and. Is this recording? It sure is. Okay, anyway. So yeah, so I did some digging and I figured out what the problem was. It took me a bit because I wasn't sure where it was going wrong. But if I put back kind of what it was, this is what we were sending as the new coordinates, which was 10 and 17 for the size, which is what was throwing it off. But anyway, so just to kind of show where we're at right now, if we can move with just one, and if I connect with Firefox, I can move pretty darn close, right? Basically, it'll just leave one space gap always currently. So the way we're going to get around that, the way we're going to do now is we need to handle collisions with players. So they would collide in that they would be touching. So right now what we have is if there is no collision, we just go ahead and move it. So we know there's going to be some collisions. So our conditions are going to be if we run into a player, if we run into terrain. Okay, so terrain would be easier because we can say whoops. Dot. For each collision points to some function, which I haven't figured out how I want to do here yet. We'll say let player collision equal false. Right? Because there's only two cases. Either they collide with a player or they collide with terrain. So if collision, which is a node, dot controller ID. So if there's a controller ID, then we do one thing. Oh, sorry. If it's a controller ID, we set this equal to true. Okay, so if player collision, else ran into terrain. So if we would run into terrain, yeah, you know what sucks about this is that we don't know, like, we don't know if they're just touching, because I want you to be able to touch terrain, just not jump over it. Golly. Let's do a collision collision, not push. Yeah, because so touching edges is fine, but I don't want you to be able to go further than that. How does Joseph do that in the move test, I wonder? There's 0011. Okay. So our direction is up. Oh, interesting. Joseph actually has the same problem where he can't allow for collisions. I wonder if we allow them to be equal, what happens here. So if the right vertex of one node, I think we just need equal signs. I think we just need to add equivalence case to say that they can. Well, see, the problem is that I need to know if they touch. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna push node, and we're gonna push something called overlap factor, which right now we're gonna say is 0. Right, because in here would collide. Okay. So our overlap factor, let's do a log in here just to see what my idea says. So we do our comp 1, comp 2, 3, and 4, 2, 3, and 4. And we're going to do this guy minus this minus this, this minus minus this, this minus this. We don't need that last one. Basically what I'm trying to do is come up with a way of figuring out whether or not it's just that the edges are touching or if there's actual overlap. Because if there is actual overlap, then that's a problem. Okay, so we refresh this, create new session. Okay, we can move still, which is nice. And let's just I don't know where our characters. Oh, okay, here we go. Ooh, boy, can we not move? Huh. That's real concerning. What did I do wrong? Okay. Okay. So we have our new session here. We join our session here. Look at our log. So if I try to go up and to the right, I get that. And that's fine. And if I try to go to the left, I'm going to get comp 1 is 10, 0. Comp 3 is -5, -5. I wonder if it would just be easier to have another utility for collision than an overlap checker. So that we could check for a collision. Wow, that actually sounds awful. First, I'd have to check for a collision, then I would have to check each of those for whether or not they're overlapping if they're a player. Gah. feel like there has to be like an easy solution to this. I'm just not seeing it. I wonder if any of these comps are 0. Right? If the difference is 0, but then if you're inside of there, if exactly one vertex is 0, meaning that can't be the case though. Because if I move to the right, correct, then 2 vertices are touching on both of them. If we're assuming rectangles, then it's okay if 2 vertices touch. Is this correct? Right. Well, okay. Well, hold on a second. If 2 vertices touch, then we're okay. They can continue. If all of them are touching, that means there's some overlap. And if one is like partially inside the other, I'm trying to imagine if there's a rectangle where okay, so let's say we have a very long rectangle. Okay, hold on. I gotta shape this out. So we have a long rectangle here, but okay. And now we have a little rectangle here, right? Vertex C1, that's 0. This vertex is not 0. This is not 0, and that's not 0. Or wait. Hold on. Oh, I see. So we're looking at the right vertex versus the left vertex. So is right less than left? Right on this one is less than left. That's false. So F. Is the right on this one less than the right of the left of this one? False. Or wait. Is the left of this... Okay. Let's do this. We're not cave people. You're 2. And you're 1. Okay, so 2's right is less than 1's left. 2's right is less than 1's left. That's false. 1's left Oh, sorry, 1's right is less than 2's left. False here as well. Because this one's left is less than that one's right. Okay. And differences. The difference between this right and this left is going to be, you know, whatever this is. So, okay. And the difference between this right and this left is the length of this. Okay. Comp 3, comparison 3. So we have our top of node 1's y. The top is, I think, this piece right here, this top one. Is that greater than the bottom of node 2? That's false. Oh, wait, no, that's true. Yes, that's true. True. Node 1's top is greater than the bottom of node 2. Yeah. Or node 2's top. I mean, I guess that actually just stops the execution, but we'll finish this out. Node 2's top is greater than the bottoms. That's false. Okay, so we have one true. So this is a collision. Or wait, hold on. Is this a collision? So one to the left is doing these comparisons, right? So node right is less than this left, which is false. So there's false there. Or node 1's right is less than node's 2 left. False again. Okay, so this is false. Or one below, top node 1, top y. This top y. Okay, so top y is greater than node 2's bottom y, which is this. And it... Oh, no, it isn't. It isn't. I'm so stupid. It isn't, right? Because this is from 0 to 100. Okay. Or the top of node 2 is greater than the bottom of node 1. They're equivalents. That's also false. Okay, so this is a collision indeed. And the difference is here, node 2's right minus node 1's left. Node 2's right, 1 here. There is a difference there. The node 1, node 1's right minus node 2's left. There's going to be a difference there. Node 1's top minus node 2's bottom. That's like this whole diff right here. And node 2's top minus node 1's bottom. That's going to be 0. So if there is... Okay, so Okay, I understand. So this will be number of vertices touching, right? So we say let, whatever, equals 0. And then we're going to do these. Let me take care of this. And we say if, or actually we don't even need to say if, we can just do is equal to 0, question mark, variable plus plus. Otherwise, nothing, right? And then this just gets plopped in 2, 3, 4, 5. And we get rid of this, and this, and this. Okay, so if, okay. So if any, all right, it says 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? I think this will work. So if there's a player collision, so what we know from this is that there is indeed a player collision. I mean, because everyone's moving one at a time, you're either going to collide into terrain or a player. So if it's terrain, right? So if it's not a player, if we're hitting terrain, we'll workshop this a little bit more. This is going to become gnarly for the time being, though, right? So because we have a collision, if collision dot, we're going to get rid of a lot of that and just do this right now. I don't remember what I called it. Number of vertices touching, right? So if the number of vertices touching is greater than 2, so if there's 3 or 4, then we do nothing, right? So instead of that, we'll say if it's less than or equal to 2, then we allow the player to move. Right? So if we're going to run into terrain, maybe I just do this all in this top one, right? If there is a player collision, if there's a collision ID, else if, and we're actually just going to move this up. So our options are, if this is a player collision, then we allow the movement. Sorry. Let me rephrase. So we're changing this up a little bit, basically from like talking this out to myself. And then we can actually change this, just be if there is this case. Oh boy, what did I do? No. Yeah, okay. Sorry. I think I probably just cut that instead of copying it. So if there's no collision, right? If there's no collisions, then we're just going to go ahead and move. If there is a collision, and that collision is with terrain, i.e. there is no controller ID, then if there's less than 2 vertices, if there's 2 or few vertices touching, then we're good to go, right? Because that means that we're going to be on either like corner to corner, or side to side, which is fine. Anything more than that would mean that there's some overlap, which we don't want to allow movement in that case. So if there's a controller ID, if we're going to run into a player, I actually think we can just do this check first, right? Because we want them to be able to move into that square, right? So if you would enter the same square as another player, if you would end up touching another player's square, that's fine. Yeah. That's okay. This is way easier than I'm making it out to be. Right, because could you be colliding with more than one thing? Yes, you could be. We don't want to just move you into that square, right? Because we could have one square here, one square here, oops, and one square here, and we could be trying to move down into here, right? And that would be fine. But that could be a problem if instead of looking like this, what it looked like was, oops. Square. Can you please? Thank you. Square. I guess since I turned this into a 5x5 grid, there is no case where it's like 50-50, right? Like there is no case where if two squares are touching, you could be in this position because everything, it's just a grid. So yeah, okay, so we're okay. Man, sorry, I'm getting so backtrack over and over and over again on this one. Okay, if collision dot node dot controller ID. So if there's a controller ID, and we'll do an and here to do player has been tagged. Cool. And we need to do our conditional here for what it means to be tagged. And now do we call this check for collisions functions anymore? We don't. So if we get rid of that, we went from 214 lines to 177 lines. Pretty good. That's a nice reduction in code complexity, I would say. Do. I guess we could do something like pick player. Right? In this case, pick player. Pick player is a function and then from here we need to pick a player at random from the player array, which we're going to get rid of anyway. So we'll do that maybe as part of a different video, because I think this one's getting close to 2 hours. Yeah, an hour and a half. Okay, well, I'll finish this up so that at least we can pick somebody and see somebody get tagged. So, if we go into our Squish.js library, src, colors, and here we go. This is what I'm looking for. Just a way of getting the random const index is equal to this, or we'll just say it node, or this dot it player is equal to, oh wait. This is fine. We don't need to set anything. So this gives us our index, right? And then we would say, where do we fill this dot player array? This dot player array to push square, and we push the whole node into here. So because we have a reference to the node in here, we could say, a couple things. This at index dot is tagged is equal to true. There we go. Okay, nice. So basically that node has become tagged, whichever one is the randomly selected player is. We need to come up with a way of like letting that player and that player alone know. There is that code does exist already in master. We just need to figure out how to do that. But like I said, that'll probably be a separate video. For right now, I just want to be able to like tag somebody and have them change color. And So if the collider is if it is a player and collision.node dot I don't need this is tagged yes, and it is tagged, then node dot is tagged is equal to true, and I swear there's a way of getting the node's color, updating the node's color. We'll do this for right now. We'll figure out how to update the color. Right, because if we're running into a player and that player is tagged, then you're now tagged and your color will change. Which this should work. npm start. Cool. We have our pick player is not defined. Bleh, of course. Oops. Okay. Assuming there is a player length. What is it? Cool. Will just give us a timeout, so we have some window. We'll, like I said, at this point I'm like pretty tired, so hopefully we can just get to tag somebody and change their color. All right, so here we go. Oh, of course. All right. Cool. We can move here. New. Join two, please. All right. Oh, no. Oh, wait. All right. Oh, that makes sense. We probably had to wait a little bit. Well, we know it's .node.node.color in the meantime. So that fixes that at least. So we'll know if somebody gets tagged on the UI. And node.node.color is equal to collision.node.color. So they become tagged and they color changes. I wonder if there's no, there's no error here either. What? I wonder what causes that. I thought I had figured it out, but apparently not. Okay. Sorry, just give me a couple seconds to make sure that the timeout was available. Okay, so when I go down one more, one of these two should change color. All right. Oh. uh, yeah, I didn't really think about this case. This becomes node. So basically, like if the player moving is the person. Although I'm interested in why the number of vertices touching here is 1. I think it's because this isn't the number of vertices touching. I think it's the number of sides that are touching. In this case, it is 2. But if we move over 1, one side is touching now. And if we go down, oh. You know, of all the things I was expecting, I don't know why I wasn't expecting this. So there is, I just have it reversed. So this needs to be greater than 0. Right, because it's going to be 1 or 2. Fine. and less than 4. Or, well, I guess and less than 3. So it needs to be between 0 and, or 1 and 2, assuming there is a collision. Okay, so I think that sifts it out, because that would mean that you no longer can jump into this person. And regardless of who the tagger is and who the taggee is, somebody is going to get tagged. Boom. Here we go. Okay. So now we should see an actual tag. Yeesh. I guess this is when I'm supposed to say professional, by the way. But ironically. Okay, so you can't jump onto them anymore. Perfect. Joseph has one where there's a... What am I looking for? No, not what I'm looking for. I think he had one where when two things ran together. Where is it? The layer test? This dot color. Okay. So how are we targeting the move here? We're saying node.node.coordinates 2D. Maybe I need to boy, I have no idea. Maybe I need to affect the fill as well. Oh. Collision.node. This needs to be .node. But anyway, one of these needs to be fill. Just to make sure. I don't know which one of these is actually being used by the renderer. I'm gonna ask Joseph. Fill versus color in game nodes. Okay. Okay, so move. Boom, there we go. Okay, so as you can see, we finally did it after like 2 hours. But yeah, so I'm gonna cut it right there. I hope you learned something from this crazed coding session. I definitely did. But anyway, yeah. So if you enjoyed it, leave a comment or a like or whatever. And if you want to follow us on Twitter, we're at Homegames.io, and our website is homegames.io. Yeesh. All right. That was rough. I'll see you later.